Dad forged my mom's will to steal half of my $1.2 million inheritance, disown me when I proved it was fake, then to reappear years later pretending to reconnect while actually planning to ask me for money again. Losing my mom was the hardest thing I had ever gone through. She had been battling cancer for years, and even though we all knew the end was coming, nothing really prepares you for the moment when it actually happens. I was 19, in my sophomore year of college, trying to juggle school while drowning in the grief of losing the most important person in my life. She wasn't just my mom, she was my best friend, my anchor, the person who always had my back. When she was gone, I felt like I had lost my foundation. My parents divorced when I was 14. At first, things were civil between them, but that changed quickly when my dad remarried just 8 months later. His new wife, Diane, had 2 kids, a 17-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. I didn't have anything against them, but we were never particularly close. I visited during holidays and on occasional weekends, but my world revolved around school and, later, taking care of my mom as her health declined. Mom came from a well-off family and had built a successful business, a boutique clothing store she had poured her heart into. When she passed away, everything was left to me, just as she had always planned. Her will was crystal clear. She left me the house I grew up in, a vacation home in Maine that had been in our family for generations, her business, and about $1.2 million in investments. She had been very open about her wishes, and I never once questioned them. Her goal was to make sure I was financially secure, that I wouldn't have to struggle, and that I would have the means to take over her store when I was ready. After the funeral, I moved into her house while finishing college. It was a lot to handle all at once, dealing with school, trying to navigate life without her, and figuring out what my future would look like now that she was gone. My dad and Diane lived about 30 minutes away, and even though we weren't extremely close, I assumed we were at least on good terms. I thought he cared about me. I thought I could trust him. I was wrong. About 6 months after Mom passed, Dad started showing up at the house more often. At first, I thought he was just checking in on me, trying to be supportive. But as time went on, I started noticing a pattern. Every visit, every conversation seemed to steer toward the topic of money. He would casually mention how Diane's ex barely paid child support, how their mortgage was weighing them down, and how my step-siblings were struggling to save for college. It was subtle at first, but it became clear that he was leading up to something. Then, one evening, he sat me down and told me outright that he believed my mom would have wanted me to help take care of the family. He said that since I had been left everything, it was only fair that I share. He suggested I pitch in on their mortgage, contribute to my step-siblings' college funds, and generally ease their financial burden. I was completely caught off guard. My mom had been very clear everything she had built was meant to secure my future, not theirs. I told him as much, trying to be as respectful as possible, but things became awkward between us after that conversation. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought he had gotten the message. But I underestimated just how far he was willing to go. A month later, I received legal documents in the mail. They claimed that my mom had made an updated will shortly before she died, naming my dad as a co-beneficiary and entitling him to half of her estate. The documents looked real, her signature was there, and the notarization seemed legitimate. For a brief, gut-wrenching moment, I doubted everything. Had she really changed her mind and just never told me? Had she wanted my dad to have half of everything after all? I immediately called the lawyer who had handled her estate, and she was just as shocked as I was. She had no record of any updated will and found the timing incredibly suspicious. She advised me to contest it right away and recommended a forensic document examiner to look into it. When I told my dad I was fighting the supposed new will, his reaction was explosive. He accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, of caring more about money than family. He claimed my mom had verbally expressed to him that she wanted to provide for him and my stepfamily before she passed, conversations that conveniently happened when I wasn't around. He told me I was dishonoring her memory by refusing to help the people she would have wanted to support. And then he said something that cut me to my core. He told me my mother would be ashamed of me. Despite the emotional manipulation, I went forward with the investigation. The forensic examiner confirmed my worst fears. The signature on the so-called new will was a forgery. It was close to my mom's handwriting, but not quite right, just different enough for an expert to prove it was fake. The notary stamp was also fraudulent. The person whose name appeared on the document had no record of notarizing anything for my mother. I confronted my dad with the evidence, expecting some kind of breakdown, some kind of admission of guilt. Instead, he doubled down. He accused me of fabricating the forensic report out of greed. He insisted that my mom had wanted him to have part of her estate, and that it was only fair. Then he pivoted, telling me that Diane's first husband had passed away recently, leaving them nothing, and that they deserved a fresh start too. That was the moment I realized just how little he actually cared about me. I told him that if he didn't drop this fraudulent claim, I would take legal action. And that's when he showed me exactly who he was. He told me that if I wasn't willing to share, then I was no longer welcome in his life. He said I was no longer his daughter. The next several months were brutal. He actually followed through with his lawsuit, trying to claim half of my mom's estate based on a forged will. My lawyer assured me we would win, but that didn't make the process any easier. It was long, exhausting, and expensive. On top of that, my dad was going around spreading lies, telling mutual friends and family members that I was hoarding money while my step-siblings struggled. Some people actually believed him. Some people cut me off. The case dragged on for almost a year, during which I focused on finishing college and running my mom's boutique. When the ruling finally came, it was in my favor. The forged will was thrown out, and my dad's claim was dismissed. The judge even hinted that criminal charges could be pursued, but I just wanted it all to be over. After the ruling, my dad sent me one last email, telling me that I had destroyed our family and that he hoped I was happy with my blood money. Then he blocked me. My step-siblings sent me similar messages, and just like that, they were out of my life. For the next few years, I had no contact with any of them. During that time, I made my own choices about my inheritance. I sold the vacation home and started a scholarship fund for students who had lost a parent to cancer. I expanded the boutique into a small chain and launched a program to provide professional clothing and mentorship to women getting back on their feet. I even set aside a portion of the inheritance in an emergency fund not for my dad, but in case my step-siblings ever genuinely needed help, even if they never spoke to me again. And then, out of nowhere, a few days ago, my dad reached out. After 6 years of complete silence, this was how he chose to reach out. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Just a vague statement and a request to talk. I was stunned. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the best of me. I looked him up on social media and found out that he and Diane were in the middle of a messy divorce. From what I gathered through mutual acquaintances, Diane had been having an affair with their neighbor for the past 2 years, and now everything was falling apart. I sat with the information for a while, trying to process what it all meant. Was he reaching out because he genuinely regretted what he had done? Or was he just looking for support now that his marriage was crumbling? And how did he even find out about the scholarship fund and the business programs? Had he been keeping tabs on me this whole time? I don't know what to do. The logical part of me says that responding would be a mistake, that opening that door again could lead to more manipulation, more heartache. But then there's another part of me that hesitates. He's still my father. Despite everything, there's still a small part of me that wonders if people can change. Am I being too harsh if I ignore him? Or would I just be setting myself up for more pain if I let him back into my life? Update 1. The amount of support and thoughtful advice I received after sharing my dilemma was overwhelming in the best way possible. It felt surreal to have so many people weigh in, offering different perspectives and helping me see things more clearly. I took my time reading through everything, letting it all sink in, and after careful consideration, I decided that I would respond to my father's message, but cautiously. I didn't want to rush into anything or open myself up to more pain without some kind of boundary in place. So, I kept my response short and to the point. I told him I was willing to hear what he had to say, but I wasn't comfortable with an in-person meeting just yet. Instead, I suggested we start with a phone call and see how that went. His response came almost immediately. He agreed without hesitation, and we set up a time to talk the following evening. As the hours ticked by before the call, I felt a mix of emotions: anxiety, curiosity, and even a little dread. It had been so many years since I had last spoken to him, and so much damage had been done. I had no idea what to expect. Would he be apologetic? Defensive? Would he try to manipulate me again, or would he truly take responsibility for what he had done? When the call finally happened, it was intense. He didn't waste time with small talk or pleasantries. Instead, he dove straight into what he had to say. He acknowledged everything: the lies, the betrayal, the lawsuit, and most importantly, the fact that there was no real justification for any of it. He admitted that he had made an unforgivable decision and that he had been driven by a mix of desperation and entitlement. He explained that when Diane's ex-husband passed away, he left behind a mountain of debt that somehow ended up becoming their problem. The financial strain had put them in a tough position, and in his panic over providing for his new family, he convinced himself that he was entitled to part of my mother's estate. He described feeling trapped, angry, and desperate to secure a future for his stepchildren, so much so that he crossed a line he could never take back. As he spoke, I mostly listened. I didn't interrupt, didn't offer any reassurance or validation. I just let him talk. Eventually, I asked him something that had been weighing on my mind. How did he even find out about everything I had done with the inheritance? His answer surprised me. He said he had first heard about it through a coworker. Apparently, this person's daughter had received the scholarship I had set up in my mother's honor, and they had spoken about it in passing at work. Curious, my father looked me up online and found articles about the boutique chain I had expanded and the mentorship program I had created. He admitted that he had been following my success from a distance for a while, never reaching out because he felt too ashamed. He said he had spent years regretting everything but had been too proud and maybe too scared to do anything about it. But when his marriage to Diane fell apart, he was forced to reevaluate his entire life. That, he said, was what finally pushed him to reach out. When he eventually expressed his hope that we could rebuild some kind of relationship, I didn't give him the answer he was probably hoping for. I told him, as honestly as I could, that I wasn't sure. Trust wasn't something that could be restored overnight, and I needed time to process everything before deciding what I wanted to do next. After the call ended, I cried for hours, not just for what had happened all those years ago, but for everything I had lost along the way. I thought about the family I had once believed I would always have, the people who had so easily turned their backs on me, and the version of my father I had once trusted before everything fell apart. For now, I've chosen to proceed with extreme caution. We scheduled a video call for the following week, and I'm taking things one step at a time. I refuse to rush into anything or let emotions cloud my judgment. In the midst of all of this, something completely unexpected happened. I received an email from my stepbrother. Unlike my stepsister, who, according to him, still wants nothing to do with me, he reached out to apologize. He admitted that back when everything fell apart, he had been caught up in the narrative my father and Diane had pushed. He had believed what they told him about me being greedy and selfish, and in his teenage mind, he saw me as the villain in the situation. But now, as an adult, he saw things differently. He said that looking back, he regretted how he had treated me and how he had allowed himself to be manipulated into shutting me out. He told me he was sorry for the role he had played and that if I was open to it, he would like the chance to catch up and maybe make amends. I agreed. We set up a time to talk soon, and while I'm keeping my expectations low, I'm also open to hearing him out. It feels strange to have these people suddenly reappear in my life after so many years of silence. I'm still trying to process it all while keeping my guard up. I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know if reconnecting will bring healing or just reopen old wounds. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time, giving myself the space to make choices that feel right for me. Update 2. Lately, things have taken a turn I honestly didn't see coming. For the first time in what feels like forever, I had a real conversation with my dad. We did a video call, and on the surface, it seemed like a good thing. He looked genuinely sorry, or at least he seemed that way. We talked about everything that had happened, years of silence, hurt feelings, all the complicated stuff that never got dealt with. It was emotional. I won't lie, part of me felt this little spark of hope, like maybe we were finally turning a corner. Maybe we could actually rebuild something. We agreed to take it slow and made a plan to meet up for coffee the following weekend. Just something casual. I didn't want to rush anything, but I was cautiously optimistic. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't holding on to false hope. But then everything kind of fell apart. I got a call from my stepbrother out of the blue. He sounded anxious, like he wasn't sure if he should be telling me something but felt like he had to. He'd gone over to my dad's place to pick up a few things he'd left behind. While he was there, he overheard a conversation between my dad and Diane, his wife, or maybe ex-wife now, I'm not even sure what their status is anymore. Apparently, they were talking about money, how the divorce had drained them, how they were both struggling to get back on their feet. Then my name came up. My dad said something about how he was working on getting back in my good graces. He mentioned that I was successful now and hinted that maybe I'd be able to help them out financially. Hearing that hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe that he reached out because he cared, because he missed me, because he regretted how things had gone down. But now I was wondering if I'd been naive. Was he just trying to get close to me because he thought I could bail him out? Was this just history repeating itself? I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I booked an emergency therapy session because I needed to sort through what I was feeling. I've done a lot of work on myself in the past few years, and I didn't want to act purely out of emotion. My therapist reminded me that while what my stepbrother heard was concerning, I didn't have the full story. It was possible my dad's words had been misheard, or taken out of context. She encouraged me not to make any big decisions yet, to stay grounded and gather more information. So I came up with a little plan. I texted my dad and suggested we switch our coffee meetup to dinner. I picked a restaurant that was nice, but nothing fancy or extravagant, and I told him I'd be treating since things had been going well for me. It wasn't a lie, I am doing okay financially, but this was also a subtle test. I wanted to see how he'd respond to the idea of me paying, and whether money would suddenly become the center of the conversation. His response was revealing. He said yes immediately, seemed really eager actually. But not long after, he started steering the conversation toward his financial problems. He talked about how hard the separation had been, how the legal fees were draining him, how he was trying to find a new apartment, and how Diane was making things messy. He didn't ask for money directly, but the undertone was there. It was like he was laying the groundwork, planting seeds. It felt less like a dad trying to reconnect with his daughter, and more like someone building up to a request. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the timing. Add that to what my stepbrother heard, and it all felt calculated. Like he hadn't really changed. Like this was all just a different version of the same game. It hurt. It still hurts. But despite all that, I've decided to go through with the dinner. Not because I'm okay with what's happening, but because I need to hear it from him directly. I want to give him the space to be honest. If he brings up money or starts dropping more hints, I'm going to address it head on. I won't dance around it. I need to know the truth, even if it sucks to hear. I'm not the same person I was years ago. I'm not that hurt kid desperate for his love and approval. I've built a life on my own. So while part of me still wants to believe there's a chance we could fix things, the other part of me is ready to walk away if I have to. This dinner feels like a fork in the road. I guess what I am wondering is, can people actually change? Or am I just setting myself up to be let down again? I honestly don't know. But one thing I do know, I'm going into that dinner with my eyes wide open. No more blind hope. No more second guessing my instincts. I'm going to trust myself this time, no matter how this plays out. Update 3, hey guys, I met my dad for dinner last night, and honestly, I'm still trying to process everything. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm not even sure where to begin, but I wanted to share, especially since so many of you have followed this whole journey with me. I got to the restaurant early, partly because I hate being late, but mostly because I needed a few minutes alone to breathe and settle my nerves. I didn't know what to expect. I kept going over different scenarios in my head, trying to mentally prepare for anything: awkward silences, emotional outbursts, hidden agendas. My stomach was in knots. When he finally walked in, I barely recognized him at first. He looked older, smaller somehow. Not physically, but just worn down. Like life had really hit him hard since the last time I saw him. For a second we just stared at each other, unsure what to do. A handshake felt too cold, a hug too much. We ended up doing this quick, stiff side hug that didn't feel natural, but it was the best we could manage in the moment. We sat down and started with small talk. It was surface level stuff: the weather, the food, the traffic. Then we started talking about my business ventures, and to my surprise, he seemed genuinely curious. He asked real questions, thoughtful ones, about how I managed the logistics of multiple locations, how I handled staffing and budgeting, and how I knew when to expand. For a little while, I felt myself relaxing. It almost felt normal. I started wondering if I'd gotten it all wrong, if maybe this dinner really was about reconnecting and not about money or guilt or obligations. There was a small part of me that started to hope, quietly, that maybe he had changed. But then the shift came. It was subtle, but clear. Our food had just been brought to the table when he let out a long sigh, like he was about to offload something heavy. He started talking about his divorce, how messy and painful it had been, how Diane was making things worse than they needed to be. Then he moved into talking about his financial struggles, how the legal fees were overwhelming, how starting over at his age felt impossible. He didn't say the words "can you help me," but the implication was thick in the air. You could feel it in the way he paused, the way he looked at me, the weight behind his words. I knew this moment was coming, and I had rehearsed in my head how I would respond. Still, when it actually happened, it was hard. I took a deep breath and told him that I knew. I told him I was aware of what he'd said to Diane, that I knew he had talked about reconnecting with me as a possible way to get financial help. His face changed immediately. First, shock. Then shame. For a split second, I braced myself for him to deny it or try to flip the script. But instead, something unexpected happened. He broke down. He didn't cry loudly or make a scene. He just put his head in his hands and started crying, quiet, steady tears that honestly caught me off guard. It was the first time in my entire life I had seen my father that vulnerable. When he finally spoke again, his voice was shaky. He admitted it. All of it. He said yes, money was on his mind when he first reached out. He said he wasn't proud of it, but he was desperate and lost and didn't know who else to turn to. He didn't try to make excuses. He just sat in the discomfort of it. Then, he told me something that hit me right in the chest. He said that when he heard about the scholarship and mentorship program I'd started with the inheritance from my mom, something inside him changed. He said it made him realize how far gone he was, that while I had taken the worst moments of my life and turned them into something meaningful, he had done the opposite. He had spiraled. He said it made him feel ashamed not just of the money issues or what he did years ago, but of the person he had allowed himself to become. He told me that yes, financial help had crossed his mind. But so had something else, the need to face what he'd done and try, in whatever time he had left, to make some kind of amends. He said he understood if I never wanted to see him again. He wouldn't blame me. And in that moment, I just sat there, completely still. I had expected manipulation. I had expected gaslighting or excuses. But what I saw was something real, a man stripped of all pride, finally facing the truth. After sitting with it for a minute, I made a decision. I told him about the emergency fund I had set aside years ago. A chunk of money I'd kept tucked away, not for him, not specifically, but because somewhere deep down, I knew there might come a day where I'd want to help if it felt right. I told him I wasn't giving him a blank check. But I would cover 3 months of rent for a decent place, just enough to give him a stable landing. I also offered to connect him with a financial advisor who had helped me when I was just getting started. I made it clear that this wasn't a reward, and it didn't mean everything was suddenly okay. It was just a step. A way to make sure money never again became the centerpiece of our relationship. By the time we left, something had shifted. We hugged again, this time longer, less stiff. Still a little awkward, but warmer. Like maybe, just maybe, we had broken through something. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant or at peace. But I did feel lighter. Like a weight had been lifted. Not because everything is magically fixed, it's not, but because, for once, we talked like two people who were ready to be honest. No masks. No power plays. Just two flawed humans trying to figure out if there's anything worth salvaging. I don't know what the future holds. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. It's going to take time, and effort, and a whole lot of boundaries. But I do feel something I haven't felt in a long time: hope. Not blind hope. Not the kind that ignores red flags. Just a small, cautious hope that maybe we can take things one step at a time. Maybe we won't ever have a perfect father-daughter relationship, but maybe we can find something in the middle. Something real. If nothing else, this whole experience has taught me that forgiveness isn't about pretending the past never happened. It's about deciding how much of that past you're willing to carry forward. And for me, the answer is, just enough to remember the lesson, but not enough to let it weigh me down. I've also realized that setting boundaries doesn't have to mean cutting people off. And that honoring my mom's legacy isn't just about how I spend the money she left behind, but how I live my life. With strength, with compassion, and with the ability to choose grace without sacrificing my own peace. I don't know if I'll post again for a while. My dad and I have a long road ahead, and I need space to figure out where we go from here. But I wanted to thank you all truly. Your comments, advice, and just the fact that you were here to listen, it helped more than you know. Whatever happens next, I'm not facing it alone. And that means everything.